Afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to EIG's 19th webinar on new product and service introduction, development for speed to resiliency. This is the beginning of our Need for Speed series with Mark and Phil. Thank you for taking the time to attend today's webinar with Enhance International. This is our 19th webinar. And I really appreciate you taking the time today to be with us, especially in light of coronavirus. We do appreciate it. And we hope that your family and loved ones are well and safe. My name is Jim DeVries, founder and president of Enhance International Group. We are a platform of 40 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers dedicated to empowering the organization's workforce by focusing the partner's expansive expertise. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining, positive margin growth. We thrive for delivering the 1 + 1 = 3, but we like to do the 1 + 1 + 1 = infinity. We hope we find the information today's webinar interesting for you and your teams, and we welcome your questions and comments to support your efforts. We have a cell phone. If you have a cell phone handy or another window open, please do log into the Poll Everywhere website at pollev.com, Greg Slagle 910. Since March of 2020, we've been holding these webinars covering people, process, and technology. And we've also had 3 fireside chats on COVID-19 and the recovery, the WE recovery that we just covered yesterday, building a visible, resilient digital ecosystem and establishing a resilient enterprise. Our next webinar will be on AI documentation and automation, how to in 3 simple steps of taking OCR and making it visible. We'll also have more on the online 90-day action plan for supply chain risk and resiliency at the end of the month. And then starting next month, we'll get into rapid skills development with Greg McLaughlin. We'll also be continuing this series covering the other topics in this, and the rational risk taking and digital transformation and sprints and agile. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We'll start off with Dr. Phil Samuel.
I'm Phil Samuel from Lean Methods Group. At Lean Methods Group, we specialize in 3 things. Number 1, operational excellence. That's a continuous improvement approach. Number 2, innovation and design, and that relates to new products, new services, new processes, and new business models. And number 3 is strategy. And when we say strategy, strategy creation, as well as strategic planning and allocating resources. Those are the 3 areas we focus at Lean Methods.
Thanks, Phil. And Mark?
Yes, I'm Mark Sneeringer. I've got a long history of business process improvement work, going back to being part of the original rollout of Six Sigma at GE. Where I'm focused nowadays is on continuous improvement, mainly Six Sigma, Lean, design for Six Sigma, but also doing quite a bit of work with companies on their new product introduction processes.
Well, we're really fortunate to have both Mark and Phil here to lead us through this webinar. And just a kind reminder is that on the next slide here, we have the different responses that we would like everyone to participate in. We're going to be kicking off this webinar with a question right away. So Please log into this if you have not already, because our very first question is a polling question. So with that, we're going to just kick it off here with a question to the group here. It's how's new product introduction speed in your industry changed? Has it changed due to COVID-19? One is greatly accelerated. B is accelerated. C is same as before the pandemic, and D slower than before the pandemic. So please provide your responses there, and we'll start showing the responses once we get to 3. So we have some folks have, that's interesting. I think there were 3 respondents so far, and now there's even more growing. We have greatly accelerated, and a third there, and 2/3 in slower than the pandemic. Mark, Phil, do you have any comments on what you're seeing out there?
I think the slower than pandemic makes sense from the standpoint that it's, and we'll talk about this, how it's more difficult to do some of the things you normally do when you're developing a new product or service.
What we saw in the COVID-19 is actually hundreds of innovations. And if you study them, a large percentage of them are not from the incumbent companies, rather from new entrants, because they have nothing to lose. They saw the opportunity and jumped on it. Many incumbent companies decided to preserve cash and stay put, hoping that the pandemic will go away. So this is not surprising that we have a large percentage of D.
Excellent. Well, thanks for everyone for participating. Hopefully you're good with pollev.com, and we're off to start the webinar. Phil?
Sure. COVID has released the pent-up demand for speed and resiliency for new product introduction. We all witnessed hundreds of success stories as well as failure stories during this time. In a world where life cycle of products and services are getting shortened, speed becomes key to creating competitive advantage. In this webinar, we will focus on all the foundational factors, including speed, for success with NPI in a hyper-competitive world. So after speed, the next factor we think about is planning. And the planning is essential to facilitate speed and effectiveness of product and services development. Then the next one is information transparency. Information transparency helps us eliminate lost time and rework in communication while we are developing product and services. Then the execution tactics, they're essential to eliminate wasted time and effort. The fifth factor we consider that is foundational for speed and resiliency is establishing rigor to your product development process that enables opportunities for increased speed and resiliency. So let's examine each of these factors in greater detail. So the first factor is speed. The pace of speed of innovation is typically driven by the life cycle of the associated products and services. They vary by industries as shown in this diagram or the slide. Some industries such as aerospace and power generation are characterized by long life cycles, whereas other industries such as smartphones and computer industry are characterized by very short life cycles. However, during the last decade, we have witnessed the shortening of the life cycle and consequently the speeding up of product development in all industries. The pace of change is driven by the acceleration of various factors in the business environment. Customer expectations are changing rapidly. New technologies are arriving at faster pace. Barriers to competition are diminishing. Incumbents are easily challenged by the disruptors from outside the industry. So these are all summarized in this particular slide. Jim?
Thanks, Phil. As we know, we want to go faster and faster. We all know that our attention span is much shorter than it used to be. It used to be the 8-minute rule, then a 3-minute. Now I think it's a 3-second rule. So we all want something bigger and better or smaller and faster as time goes on. And if you look at the S curves, the traditional S curve, where you're looking at perceived performance versus time on the x-axis, you see that an S curve really has 3 major phases. The first phase is it's a novel product, and it's slow to rise. And you have the 5-degree slope of the line, and that's where you're doing value-based selling of that product. And then it kind of teeters out at the end and becomes a commodity. And there are a lot of products out there that are still viewed as commodities until the next S curve comes along and displaces that given technology. And as you can see over the years, as first, second, and third generation products occur, these S curves are getting shorter and shorter in time to reach that ideal final result, the IFR, that is out there somewhere and it's somewhat of a moving target. So what's interesting here is with COVID and what's happened in the last year or so is what industries were really accelerated. And this comes off of statistics, and it shows that from the S&P market value growth that, the information technology industry has exploded. That's not really a big secret. And of course, the pharma and the medical industries have done quite well for obvious reasons. And then the virtual remote learning and collaboration, followed by the cleaning and protective supplies. So we're seeing this acceleration. And what the word on the street now is that delivery of the last mile is really it's kind of combined in some of these, but we're going to see even a larger explosion and coming up with new products and services to support that delivery, that home delivery in that last mile. So very dynamic workplace and work environment to get these new products and services out the door as quickly as possible. Mark?
Yeah, so while you see, the global pandemic has increased the need for speed in certain areas that Jim just talked about, it is hampering innovation across all industries. The ability to gather customer insights through direct observation and interaction with the customers has been greatly reduced. So has in-person collaboration among development team members. Experimentation's also been hurt, with shutdowns and distancing making them more difficult. So, and then finally developing a supply chain for a new product is a critical part of product innovation. And there's been an immense disruption due to the pandemic, and that's making that task harder as well. So this is what I was talking about a little earlier of how the pandemic is actually impacting everybody's attempt to move faster in the development of products and services. So what does this look like when you have a new, you get this speed? And so I'm trying to move the slide, Jim, and it's not moving.
There we go. I'll move
Yeah.
for you.
Okay. And one of the questions, and this was asked years ago when I was first getting into this stuff, is what would be different financially if you had had your new product earlier? And so this first half of the slide is about a sensitivity analysis. So these aren't real examples, but basically if you said, I've got $100 million market, I've got a 25% share, and if I can get a new product out there, I can pick up 2 share points. That's $1 million impact. That's an 8% increase in your margin by being able to get out there first or with that new product. The other end of the spectrum is price erosion, which I think a lot of us have, where if you say I'm losing 5% a year, if I can hold that off by putting some innovation out there, there's another half a million impact. So those are just some sensitivity analysis, some actual examples, which this came up now as oops, okay. In terms of market growth, there's a supermarket chain out there. If you think that their product is new stores, for every day that new store isn't open, it's about an $80,000 loss in revenue or missed revenue. So if you've had construction delays up to about 2 months, you're approaching $5 million in revenue impact. So speed has a definite impact there. And then there was a study done a while ago by a major electronics company, which showed that if you stay on budget, but miss your introduction date in their fast moving market by 6 months, you wipe out 50% of the profit from that product. But if you overspend your budget by 50% and stay on time, you only lose about 3%. So they proved definitely that time is more valuable than money. So at that, I'm going to turn it over to, and then I guess the last point on this is that speed also gives you the ability to pick when you want to go to market. So if you can get something developed quickly, you can actually sort of put it on the shelf and wait for the right market moment. So here's an example that comes out of the fast-moving consumer goods. Coca-Cola has what they call their transformational innovation team, and they do a lot of these fundamentals right. They've got groups of experts that work within this. They test the products on small scale so they can get quick understanding and trade and move that data back and forth within the team. And they do a lot of things in parallel that they used to do in sequence, which shortens innovation timelines. And then the other piece that sort of makes this work, especially in a regulated industry, is they've got all those regulatory, safety, and environmental folks involved right from the get-go to make sure that they get out there. So they've had some big, a couple examples out of this, or a couple of their brands, Odwalla and Honest, have been able to move products from the idea stage to the actual in the market much faster than they used to. So I think we're going to turn it back over to Jim at this point.
Thanks, Mark. So that was a bit of an introduction on some of our experiences with speed to market. And now we're going to kind of change the direction of the webinar slightly. And again, if you have any questions or comments, or please feel free to enter them into the Q&A or the chat room, and we'll pick those up and socialize them. We look forward to your thoughts. So just regrouping again is, today's focus is, we can't ignore the basics to increase our new product introduction speed. And what are those table stakes? Well, they come down to 3 things: planning, communication, and execution. I think these are things we hear every day, but somehow we sometimes don't pay enough attention to them. So we've laid out this next part of the webinar to give you provide you some examples of how to do or get started in these areas. So again, planning, we want to be efficient, of course, with our resources and time. We want to communicate. And as we always say, communicate, communicate, communicate. You can't over communicate to eliminate that time between the knowledge and decisions. And as Mark was saying in the example, time is money. So any delay in making a decision can cost you. And execution, the discipline to avoid that rework and speed up decisions. So those three are our core table stakes that we'll be covering today. And then our subsequent webinars will be along the pillars of rational risk taking, digital transformation, and sprints and agile. And those are our upcoming webinars. Phil?
So for the next few minutes, let's take each of these items in greater detail. As Tim mentioned earlier, planning is all about efficient use of resources and time in order to facilitate speed and effectiveness. So let's take a look at planning. When it comes to planning and focus, there is no better example than looking at Apple and Steve Jobs. When Jobs returned to Apple, you move the slide, advance the slide one more. Thank you. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, it was producing a random array of computers and peripherals, including a dozen different versions of Macintosh. After a few weeks of product review sessions, he finally had enough. "Stop," he shouted. "This is crazy." He grabbed a magic marker, padded in his bare feet to a whiteboard, and drew a 2x2 grid you're seeing on the screen. "Here is what we need," he declared. On the columns, you have consumer and the pro. Then he labeled the rows as desktop and portables. Their job, he told his team members, was to focus on 4 great products, 1 for each quadrant. All other products should be canceled. There was a stunned silence. But by getting Apple to focus on making just 4 computers, he saved the company. Deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do, Jobs pointed out. That's true for companies, and it's true for products and services. So after he righted the company, he began taking his top 100 people on a retreat each year. On the last day, he would stand in front of the whiteboard and ask, "What are the 10 things we should be doing next?" People would fight to get their suggestions on the list. Jobs would write them down and then cross off the ones he decreed to be dumb. After much jockeying, the group would come up with a list of the top 10. Then Steve Jobs would slash the bottom 7 and announce, "We can only do 3. Focus was ingrained in Jobs' personality and has been honed by his Zen training. He relentlessly filtered out what he considered distractions. Colleagues and family members would at times be exasperated as they tried to get him to deal with issues, a legal problem, a medical diagnosis they considered important. But he would give a cold stare and refuse to shift his laser-like focus until he was ready. Near the end of his life, Jobs was visited by Larry Page, who was about to resume control of Google, the company he had co-founded. Even though their companies were feuding, Jobs was willing to give some advice. "The main thing I stressed was focus," he recalled. Figure out what Google wants to be when it grows up, he told Page. It's now all over the map. What are the 5 products that you want to focus on? Get rid of the rest because they are dragging you down. They are turning you into Microsoft. They are causing you to turn out products that are adequate but not great. Page followed the advice. In January 2012, he told the employees to focus on just a few priorities, such as Android and Google Plus, and to make them beautiful the way Jobs would have done it. Jim, can you advance through the next slide? Thank you. When it comes to planning, there are long-term planning, short-term planning, and contingency planning. An agile planning system is able to respond to changing conditions. First, we must create a detailed plan for the next project phase that's essentially cast in concrete. But we build a rough plan for the full project that includes contingencies for risk items. This enables us to absorb needed mid-course corrections in the next phase. We should track actual project time and resources for better estimates next time. An Indian company called Max has innovated a touchless elevator panel to reduce the risk of COVID right in the middle of the crisis. Founded in 2009, TechMax is an electronic product designer, developer, and manufacturer based out of India. During COVID-19, they altered their plans and decided to pursue other relevant opportunities arising from COVID-19. According to the research, there are about 3,500 bacteria approximately per square inch of an elevator button. That's about 17 times greater number of bacteria that a typical toilet seat would have. And in the current scenario of COVID-19, there's a huge chance that someone will get infected because of using elevator buttons. So using the touchless panel, they have created a new solution where no one needs to touch elevator buttons. Also, this panel can be used with any brand and any type of elevator, and it works equally well inside the elevator and for the buttons while you wait for the elevator to come down. Here we have a great example of business agility and flexible business planning. Let's turn to the next slide. This diagram illustrates the research conducted by Richard Foster at former McKinsey partner and the consulting firm Innosight. They revealed that an average lifespan of an S&P 500 company is getting shorter and shorter. In 1958, the average lifespan of an S&P 500 company used to be around 61 years. During the 1980s, it dropped to 20 to 25 years. Today, it's less than 18 years. Researchers believe that in 2027, 75% of the companies currently quoted on the S&P 500 will have disappeared. They will be bought out, merged, or will go bankrupt, just like Enron and Lehman Brothers. The implications are far-reaching for both incumbent companies and potential entrants. Those who are willing to see the opportunity and act on it, potential rewards are high. The protections for the incumbents are stripped out, while the opportunities for both incumbent and the new entrants are on the rise. Those examples of companies exiting and companies joining the S&P 500 illustrates this whole idea behind the shorter life cycles, not only for products, but also for companies. So the companies have the opportunity to reinvent themselves or become irrelevant.
So the last topic we want to talk about, or one of the topics we want to talk about on this planning, is resource efficiency. And one of the things to be able to do that is, first of all, understand what the responsibilities are within a project. And for that, we talk about building a RACI, which I think if you hit the button one more time, Jim, yeah, basically this is setting up who's responsible, accountable, contributes, or is informed on all the steps in a project. So this is one piece to do. The other is a work breakdown structure is necessary, and it's a big undertaking. So what we're talking about is doing it just in the next phase that you're going to be working on, and then doing capture approximate needs for the full project. That way you can have some flexibility that Phil just talked about. As you do that, that allows you to look at, do I have sufficient resources for what I want to do? And that gets you back to the focus thing, to make sure you're working on a small enough number of projects that you do have those resources. And then finally, in any business, in any development, there are some key scarce resources, individuals or teams that are very specialized, and you need them for parts of the project, but not the whole thing. And so the idea is to set your schedule so that and your preparation, so that when their touch time happens, it's as efficient as possible. So you're not waiting for them, or they're not waiting around for you to get things done. So that's one of the things that that I've found speeds up projects in terms of the efficiency, is making sure you've got enough of the resources when you need them, and especially those scarce resources that you've planned around them. So Jim, I think it's over to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So the fourth remaining area in planning is parallel activities. How do we iterate to optimize, and what we mean by that? And so, at the same time, we want to optimize critical paths of impact while driving everything to be in parallel execution. So you're weighing those two things together. Of course, our goal is to perform as many execution processes in parallel as possible while streamlining our critical paths. So first, we leverage the PERT approach, which is program, evaluation, and review technique. That's a pretty well-known technique. Then the define project's independent high-level objectives. We define the critical path for each deliverable, delivering if we can shorten the long pole in the tent of the associated tasks to achieve the main objective. Next are the dependencies between the process steps. How are those dependencies? How many do we have? Which ones of those are dependent on others, and which ones are independent? Can we trim those? Can we eliminate those? Can we reduce the impact of those? We want to run more in parallel to get more done. The third major step is creating this process model. Pro model is classically used. There's many different modeling tools out there. So you can run your Monte Carlo simulations and on your development project plan. So Monte Carlo is not just about making parts or making product, but it's also a way to optimize your overall process. And so again, we're looking for what is the most probable timeline along the path of the longest pole in the tent. So in summary, there are many different iterations of changing your different constraints, optimizing your critical path, developing and weighing trade-offs to optimize the overall new project plan. So keep in mind that the project plan is a live document. And the exercise should be performed periodically throughout the execution. This isn't something you perform at the beginning of the program and then say, oh, at the end, oh, maybe we should have done something. You should be doing this, especially when you're making major changes in process. So, we always want to look at time is money, and the more time we spend, the more money it takes. And the difference between what we said we were going to do and what we actually did is costs us money, whether you're early or late. So with the digital tools today for project planning and management, they will be covered more in detail in digitization webinar upcoming. But again, these are simple things that can be done today. We move to another question here for you, a survey question. We ask you to rank the order of your challenges in planning for your projects. In what order are these for you? And we have here lack of project and program management expertise, having that expert to drive the project. The other challenge you may have is jumping into execution with limited planning. We got to get it done. Are there a lack of PM resources? Is there a lack of leadership overall to do planning? Do you have too many projects going on, so you just don't have enough time, just too many things? And now, since somebody answered, I'm out of order. I think I left off uncertain market, external environment. So is there external things that are driving you to change? So the first one is no surprise, too many projects. That's a very popular one, and jumping into execution with limited planning and lack of project and program management expertise. Those are the things that I generally see. We generally have the technical capabilities, but we just try to do too many things. We like to solve world hunger. We're engineers, right? We like to get a lot done. All right. Any other added comments, Mark and Phil?
Yeah, this looks very familiar.
Many of us lived this dream, right?
I wouldn't call it a dream exactly. So,
well, we don't want to say nightmare right now. All right. There we go. Thanks again for that. And Mark, I think you can take off now. Or does it go back to Phil?
Phil's going to talk, I think, the agenda a bit.
Yeah, Phil, it's all yours.
Okay. We now turn our attention to the next factor, which is information transparency needed to eliminate lost time in communication. Mark, tell us more about this factor.
Yeah, so I've got a couple things I wanted to talk about here. And the first one is about an A3 knowledge sheet. So you've probably heard the term A3 sheet before, usually in context of problem solving. So the underlying intention of all A3s is to gather critical information about a topic or a project on one reasonable size page. So A3 knowledge sheets capture the information about a scientific or an engineering concept. So the slide shows the typical layout of one of these sheets. And when you do this, when you do this sort of thing, it gives your consistency to how you capture your information. It gives clarity, and it gives easy access to everybody involved. So all the important information about a single topic or a single concept is in one place, easy to find and easy to interpret by the team members. And I found these have been a very valuable asset to speeding up projects when you communicate and you build your knowledge base using this sort of a template. So on the next page, then is the other thing that in terms of communication, and that's an Obeya, or which is literally a big room. Some people call it a war room, but what you're this is part of the concept of visual management, which is an enabler for speed and clarity across just about every aspect of a business. So the Obeya is the implementation of the visual management in the NPI world. And so what happens is a space, which is usually a room, or if you guys don't have rooms, you have section off some area and it's dedicated to the project. The walls are just papered with all the documents, ranging from schedules to action lists to product drawings. So all that stuff is out where everybody can see them. And so what this does is this facilitates team discussions and cuts down the wasted time pulling documents from files, or scheduling time for meetings, finding a place to meet or that sort of thing. So these are very useful, but they also have some challenges from the standpoint that I've seen teams set them up, get really excited about them, and then they just go stale. You walk in a month later and it's the exact same information. So there's a few things that you can do to keep these relevant. One is the business leaders can expect that the data is the information is up to date, and they can drive that by using the room for any management review of the project. So the team needs to be up to date on those. Also, having clear responsibilities on who's responsible for each item helps, and then having a regular drumbeat or regular cadence that you review things also keeps it keeps things up to date. But the goal here is you're eliminating waste in terms of, hey, where are we going to have this meeting? When are we going to have this meeting? How do we get these things up there for the teams to see? And so this Obeya and the A3 are two of the things that I've found help teams move quicker, and it's reduced that time between when you have the knowledge to when you make the decision. So I think we move on then to the next area, which is, I'm going to let Phil introduce that.
So we now need to turn to the next factor, which is execution tactics needed to eliminate wasted time and effort. Mark, tell us more about this factor.
Yeah, so once again, here we've got two areas, and the first one we're going to talk about is daily management. So my ability to move the slides has disappeared, Jim, so I'm going to leave it to you to update it.
Okay.
And basically, daily management is a concept that comes out of the lean methodology, and it's a way for communication and standard work. And the idea is to eliminate waste. And so in conjunction with that Obeya that you've set up, the project team can apply these concepts to an NPI project. So the project may not need to meet every day like you would maybe in a factory, or every shift in a factory, but a regular pattern is a key element of making this work. So tasks and responsibilities are clear. Updates on actions are posted, and issues are dealt with following not only a defined procedure, but a fast procedure. And part of that procedure is including to whom do you escalate and when do you escalate, so that time is lost in a lot of projects when there's handoffs aren't clean, or the resources aren't available or competent. And so the daily management helps minimize the time between when this issue is known and when it gets addressed. And so these are the sorts of things that come out of daily management that help you move a project more quickly than you would otherwise. And then the second thing under execution is just around how do you make your gate reviews, which you're going to be having, how do you make them more efficient? And so if we move on to the next slide, if we can. Yeah, so there, and just go ahead and build it out. So gate reviews, so the goal here is you want to be fast and accurate with the major project decisions of the project. And so toll gate reviews can consume significant project time and effort, both in terms of the reviews themselves. I've seen some go on ridiculously long times, and also in terms of the team's preparation. I've seen teams spend, a week getting ready for a phase review. So the waste can be reduced by maximizing the impact of the gate meetings and by minimizing that time spent preparing them. So they should focus on critical project elements, and with detailed reviews usually held ahead of the gate, with a smaller functional team to deal with the issues, so that the gate is just hearing a summary or the decision out of those reviews, such as a technology review or a supply chain review or that sort of thing. The other thing is the participants need to be ready. These are not discovery events. This is not where nobody should ever come in there and say, well, that's the first time I've heard that. People have a responsibility to get the reviewers up to speed ahead of the meeting. And then finally, the other thing that helps minimize the project team preparation time is for your business to have standard templates and checklists that are clear and easy to work with. They have a number of things that come out of that. Not only do they tell you what you need to be presenting, but it also helps reduce the prep time. It also reduces explaining in the review why, what this template is or what this format is as you present it, because everybody will be familiar with that template. I'll make one last comment on deliverables and checklists. Another feature that you should have in any system you have like this is that there is an option to say not applicable for a given item. You need to have that agreed with the reviewers or with the people that oversee the process. But just because there's a checklist item there doesn't mean it absolutely applies to your project. So those are the top couple things about execution. So I think we've covered, the planning, the communication, and the execution. Now we're going to, I think, wrap it up. So, Phil.
The last factor is looking at establishing rigor to open more opportunities for increased speed and resilience. Many equate rigor with slowness. We disagree. Rigorous does not mean slow. In fact, rigor in new product introduction would mean eliminating wasted time and effort. How rigorous are the activities in terms of planning, in terms of collecting the voice of the customer, in terms of looking at the options for your ideas and concepts? Is it likely to be succeed? Is it feasible? Is it going to have the right impact? And then we can focus on the elities of your products. Is it going to be reliable? Is it going to be durable? All of those aspects of new product development, new service development requires rigor in terms of collecting data, rigor in terms of performing analysis, rigor in terms of experimentation or analytics to make quick decisions. Planning is important in terms of minimizing the wait times and maximizing parallel activities and resource efficiency, as we described earlier. Communication is essential to eliminate confusion and the time lags between knowledge and action. Standardized execution to drive efficiency and reduce non-value added activities are essential to speed and resiliency. Doing all of these well sets the foundation necessary for more advanced methods and processes and techniques for speed and resiliency, which we will address in future webinars. Jim, back to you. I think we have one survey left.
Yeah, we have one more survey question. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please enter them in the Q&A chat box. We appreciate your comments and thoughts. So for the last survey question we have, for which of today's topics would you like to see more information? If you could rank in order which of these topics sound very appealing to you, or if there's other topics that you expected to see and you didn't, you could make that other number one for yourself, because we didn't achieve that. And then maybe you could provide some additional comments in the Q&A. We'd appreciate that feedback. So again, in summary, a lot of these things are practices that have been around for years, but often we have that overall drive to do too many projects, as you guys mentioned it earlier in the webinar, and you're just too many things going along on the way. So this is interesting. We got a few responses: parallel paths, then setting priorities, and the NPI, project daily management, and phase gate efficiency. Setting priorities now ranks up there, moving around a bit. It sounds like you guys are familiar with the A3 knowledge sheets in Obeya. That's what I'm getting from this. Mark, Phil, any added comments here?
Yeah, the setting the priorities thing is key. I mean, it's difficult because everybody does want to do everything, not only among projects but within a project. So being able to do that well is a differentiator.
Yeah, identifying what you don't want to do. Yeah, it's a struggle because you have to identify what you're not going to do, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to raise that. Well, we're not going to do that because that might have been the key thing to make you successful. So it's hard. It's very, very difficult without strong leadership to drive you there. Any other closing comments?
We do a question. Do we want to handle that right now?
Yeah, let's handle some questions. You got some questions?
Yeah. So one of the questions: the customer expectations to drive how few products you can have. So we go back to the Apple example. Is there situations where you can't get simple because of that?
Yeah.
So the question is the customer expectations gathering and being ahead of them. Is that the question?
And I think it was more the customers you have or the market you're in demands you have a complex portfolio. I think that's what they're getting at.
Right. And what is the question?
So the question is, does customer expectation have an impact on that? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, there was no better time than the COVID-19. In the middle of it, customer expectations flipped. A lot of the expectations regarding digital accelerated. Customer unwillingness to embrace digital at a speed that changed. We were willing to go for touchless. We were willing to order food and get it delivered far more than we were before. So situations for the customer demanded changes. And so this comes back to planning and resources and allocation. Some of the foundations we spoke to today becomes very relevant, and constantly listening in, and are you able to respond quickly to customers' demand? So that takes to a foundational thinking is, how close are you to customer? Do you still stay in touch with them? Do you still have observation? Are you still studying the customer behaviors?
Okay. Thanks, Phil. I think I see another question around strategy and linking to new product development and setting priorities. If you don't have a strong strategy in your company, how do you set priorities for your new product development if it's just not there and the company doesn't take?
Yeah.
Are there any key ways that we can move forward with our new product development in considering a lack of true vision, strategy, ocean planning in the company?
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Whether you use a Hoshin or any other methods, you really have to ask the question, today where our company is. So you have a current assessment of what our products and services are, who do we serve, what are our key processes that gives us the right to be in this market. Then you should be asking, what are the key changes in the external market in terms of customer expectations, changing technologies, regulatory changes, environment, economy. Are you in touch with those things externally? That's one question. Second question is your capabilities to address those changes, your process capability, your technology capability, your people capability, your organizational capability. Strategy is about matching those two and say, here is an opportunity, here I have a capability. And when you match them, the decisions lead to new products, new services, and new business models. So if you don't have that process in motion, it becomes very difficult to allocate resources and to be cohesive about what products, what processes or what business models should we innovate. So without some level of strategic thinking, it becomes very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. What popped into my mind as you asked the question, Jim, was the old quote that if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. So this is, you've got to have that roadmap.
So one last question I'll sneak in here, and that's about, who should be involved in setting these priorities? It's number one here. Who should be driving this conversation? Should it be the R&D team? Should it be just management? Who are the players to help set priorities in a meaningful?
So the leadership that I've seen work well is product management taking the lead on that process. But you basically got to have just about everybody at the table. So you've got to have the technology folks, you've got to have the supply chain folks, you've got to have the marketing folks. So you need, so I'd say the process that works well is product management in the lead with strong participation from the rest of the functions.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And I think I'll just close it out, wrap it up here. Again, we have some future webinars coming next week, a week from today, on artificial intelligence. And we'll be having another one of these webinars in February following up on this series. Thank you, everyone, for joining. The slides will be sent to you within a day or so. The webinar will be posted on EIG. We'll notify you when it's posted within a week. And Mark, Phil, and I thank you very much for taking your time to join us today. Mark, Phil, closing comments?
Just want to say thank you. And this foundation sets us up for some very interesting topics coming up in the future.
This saying that common sense is not so common. These foundations have existed for a while. We take them for granted, yet not too many companies do them well. So starting with the foundations is the right place to kick your new product introduction to the next phase of speed and resiliency.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We hope you found this worthwhile and look forward to your feedback and comments. Have a great day.